The Vreth had been loose for 6 hours and 20 minutes. When containment lead Sorath finally ran out of ideas and started running out of corridor, I was 3 decks down when the alert hit my wrist unit. Brutus was already awake. He'd been awake since the first hull thrum of the containment, doors cycling, because Brutus noticed things like that, the way a stone notices weather. He lifted his head, tracked the sound, decided it was not his problem, and put his chin back on his paws. I pulled up the corridor schematic on my handheld and looked at the closing red bracket that marked where the Vreth had gotten to. Then I clipped Brutus's lead and we went upstairs. The Arellan Reach was a coalition supply hauler, mid-class, 12 decks, crewed by about 60 beings from 9 species and 1 human, me, Sergeant Aldrich Voss, attached as working animal handler because the coalition had a standing arrangement with Earth's auxiliary corps, and apparently, nobody had read the fine print on what working animal covered. Brutus was my working animal. He was an English Mastiff, 160 pounds of brindle and patience, with a head the size of a small engine block, and the temperament of old furniture. He had one speed, he used it for everything. The Vreth was a different matter. The Coalition's Xenobiology Division had picked it up on a survey run, a specimen from a world called Vreth Khan. The survey team had apparently visited only once, and would not be revisiting. The creature was roughly the mass of a large draft animal, built low and wide, with a hide that absorbed sensor light and a nervous system the Coalition's lead researcher, a cephalopod named Isaac, described as optimized for sustained aggression. It had been in a reinforced cell on Deck 8 for 11 days. On Day 12 it had stopped being in the cell. The containment team had tried sonic barriers. The Vreth had walked through them. They had tried a suppression field. The Vreth had walked through that too, though more slowly, which Sorath had logged as a promising data point, before the field generator was destroyed. They had tried 5 armed personnel with Coalition-grade pacifiers, and 4 of them had made it back to report that the pacifiers had not, in their professional judgment, made any impression. The 5th one was fine. She'd climbed into an overhead access shaft, which the Vreth apparently found uninteresting. By the time I reached Deck 8 with Brutus walking easy at my left knee, Sorath had pulled her team back to the far junction, and the Vreth had the middle third of the main corridor to itself. Could see it from the junction where we stopped. It was standing still, which Sorath told me later it had not done once in 6 hours. I wasn't sure why it was standing still. Brutus seemed to know. He sat down, leaned slightly against my leg, and exhaled through his nose. That long, slow, pressurized exhale that mastiffs do when they've assessed a situation and found it manageable. Handler Voss. Sorath's translation unit gave her voice a flat, clipped edge. She was a Theresi, tall, gray carapaced, built for authority and currently not projecting much of it. You are required to secure your animal and evacuate to a lower deck. He is secured, I said. He's on a lead. The animal is not rated for. He's resting, I said. Brutus was not technically resting. He was sitting in the middle of the corridor at the edge of the cleared zone, watching the Vreth, the way he watched everything, with steady, incurious attention, like a thing that has never once in its life needed to decide whether to be afraid. His ears were relaxed. His tail was doing a slow, loose quarter sweep. He had assessed the Vreth at some level I did not have access to and had reached a conclusion about. The Vreth had reached a conclusion about Brutus. It was still not moving. Sorath grabbed my arm. The carapace fingers were cold and hard, and I understood she meant it as urgency, not aggression. Voss, that creature has not responded to any stimulus we have deployed. It has breached 4 containment fields and damaged 3 crew members. Your animal is 160 of your pounds. 61 kilos, said because the coalition used metric. It will be consumed. He won't, I said. I wasn't arguing with her. I was telling her what I knew, which was that Brutus had been assessed by the Earth Auxiliary Corps, by 3 independent veterinary behaviorists, and by the instincts of every dog-aware person who had ever walked into the same room with him. And the consensus was the same across all of them. Tis understood what he was. Not in any way I could explain or that he could articulate. He just knew the weight of the room, and he knew where he sat in it, and he had never found a reason to adjust his estimate. The Vreth took 1 step toward him, just turned his head, and looked at it. Not a challenge, Nothing so animated as that. He just looked, the way a mountain looks at weather. Slow blink, the exhale. He put his chin down on his paws without breaking eye contact. The breath stopped. Sorath's translation unit clicked twice, which I had come to recognize as the Theresi equivalent of silence caused by something not computing. Behind her, I heard one of the armored containment specialists, a young Vrelian, barely out of his first posting, make a sound that his own translation unit rendered as it sat down, which was not entirely accurate. Brutus had not sat down. He had arrived at a state of rest that happened to coincide with being in a corridor with a creature that had, by the Coalition's own logs, demonstrated zero behavioral inhibition for 6 hours and 23 minutes. The Vreth stood in the corridor for another 4 minutes. I know because I counted. Then it turned, not fast, not spooked, with the unhurried economy of something that has made a private decision, and, back toward Deck 8. It walked past the remains of the suppression field generator. It walked past the scorch marks where the sonic barriers had been. It walked back through the open cell door. I heard distantly the magnetic locks engage when the automated system registered the cell as occupied. Brutus got up, stretched, the full mastiff stretch, paws extended, back arching, mouth opening wide enough to show all his teeth in what was not, I want to be clear, threat display, and looked up at me. "Good lad," I said. I filed the incident report that evening. It was 3 paragraphs. Brutus had accompanied me to the containment deck. The Vreth had returned to its cell. No personnel or animals had been injured. ISIC's incident report was 68 pages and included a 12-page addendum that the Coalition's translation team rendered into standard as something like passive apex suppression via resting posture, and which the crew of the Orellan Reach immediately began calling "Crews are crews," the exhale protocol. The Coalition filed a formal query with Earth's Auxiliary Corps requesting the behavioral classification of English Mastiffs under the Auxiliary Working Animal Charter. Earth's Corps liaison sent back a 2-sentence reply. First sentence confirmed that Mastiffs were classified as domestic companion animals under Category 1. No restrictions. The second sentence noted that Category 1 was the lowest threat classification the Charter issued, and that the Corps hoped the query had been helpful. I read that reply twice. Then I looked at Brutus, who was asleep on his mat with his chin on my boot, producing at long intervals the slow pressurized exhale that was apparently the only containment protocol on the Orellan Reach that had worked. I decided not to explain it. Some things you leave for the room to work out.